In 1956, researchers opened a container of preserved meat that had been stored in an Arctic depot for nearly 50 years. The meat inside remained edible, not just technically safe to consume, but genuinely palatable and nutritious after half a century without refrigeration. This wasn't some laboratory experiment using advanced technology. The container held pemmican, a food developed by indigenous peoples of North America centuries before European contact. During World War II, Allied forces relied on this ancient preservation method for survival rations, lifeboat supplies, and special operations missions behind enemy lines. Pemmican can last 10 to 20 years under normal storage conditions. Some documented samples remained edible beyond 50 years. No electricity required, no chemical preservatives, no freezing. Yet by the 1960s, commercial production had essentially ceased. The Western world abandoned the most shelf-stable meat product ever created. The reason we stopped making it reveals uncomfortable truths about modern food systems. Number 1. The food that conquered continents. Long before European ships reached North American shores, indigenous peoples of the Great Plains had solved a problem that still challenges modern food science. They needed portable, nutritious food that would sustain hunters and warriors across vast distances and through brutal winters. The solution they developed would eventually fuel polar expeditions, military campaigns, and transcontinental trade networks. The Cree called it pemmican, derived from their word for fat. English speakers eventually adapted this to pemmican. The basic concept was elegantly simple, but required precise execution. Lean meat, typically bison or elk, was sliced thin and dried completely until it became brittle enough to shatter. This dried meat was then pounded into powder and mixed with an equal weight of rendered animal fat. Some makers added dried berries for additional nutrition and flavor. The resulting product packed roughly 3,500 calories per pound. That density exceeds almost any other whole food. A single pound of pemmican contained more energy than 3 pounds of fresh steak. A hunter could carry a week's worth of calories in a small pouch rather than dragging along hundreds of pounds of fresh meat. More importantly, the food refused to spoil. Properly made pemmican stored in cool, dry conditions remained safe and nutritious for years. Some caches lasted decades. The combination of complete moisture removal and fat encapsulation created an environment where bacteria simply could not survive. Hudson's Bay Company recognized this value immediately. By the early 1800s, the company purchased over 250,000 pounds of pemmican annually from Metis producers in the Red River settlement. This single food source powered the entire fur trade across millions of square miles of wilderness. Voyageurs paddling canoes for months relied on pemmican as their primary sustenance. Number 2. Polar expeditions and military adoption. Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen became the first person to reach the South Pole in December 1911. When asked about his success where others had failed, he credited several factors. Proper clothing, sled dogs, and pemmican. Amundsen called it the most satisfying food he knew, essential to his expedition's survival during months of Antarctic travel. Amundsen wasn't unusual in this assessment. Nearly every major polar expedition of the 19th and early 20th centuries relied on pemmican as a primary food source. Robert Peary carried it during multiple North Pole attempts. Ernest Shackleton's legendary Antarctic expeditions depended on pemmican caches. Frederick Schwatka led an 11-month Arctic expedition sustained almost entirely by this single food. These explorers valued pemmican for reasons beyond mere preservation. The high-fat content provided warmth in extreme cold. Fats burn slowly, delivering sustained energy rather than quick spikes and crashes. The caloric density meant expeditions could carry far less weight while maintaining adequate nutrition. And the complete protein content prevented the muscle wasting that plagued expeditions relying on grain-based foods. Military strategists took notice. During World War II, British forces incorporated pemmican into survival and operational planning. Royal Navy lifeboats carried pemmican rations. The compact bricks could survive weeks floating in seawater without contamination. No can opener required, no cooking necessary. Shipwrecked sailors could consume life-sustaining calories immediately. Special operations units found different advantages. Commandos operating behind enemy lines needed food that required no cooking fires. Fires created light and smoke, betraying positions to enemy forces. Pemmican could be eaten cold, silently, and quickly during brief rest periods. Unlike canned rations, opening a pemmican container made no noise. Number 3. The science behind decades of preservation. Understanding why pemmican lasts requires understanding why food spoils. Most food degradation comes from 3 sources: bacterial growth, mold development, and oxidation. Pemmican defeats all 3 through simple physical and chemical barriers. Bacteria require moisture to survive and reproduce. Fresh meat contains roughly 75% water, providing an ideal environment for microbial growth. Traditional pemmican preparation removes virtually all of this moisture. Dried meat used in pemmican contains less than 3% water. At this level, bacteria cannot function. They remain dormant or die entirely. Mold presents a lower threshold, but still requires moisture levels above 15 to 20%. Properly dried pemmican falls far below this range. The powder dry meat simply offers no environment where mold can establish itself. Fat encapsulation addresses the remaining threat. When powdered dried meat mixes with warm liquid tallow, the fat coats every particle. This coating accomplishes 2 things. First, it prevents the dried meat from reabsorbing atmospheric moisture. The fat creates a waterproof barrier around each fragment. Second, it blocks oxygen from reaching the protein. Without oxygen, oxidation cannot occur. The choice of fat matters enormously. Beef and bison tallow consist primarily of saturated fats. Saturated fats resist oxidation far better than unsaturated fats. Vegetable oils or pork fat would turn rancid within months. Properly rendered beef tallow remains stable for years because its molecular structure doesn't react readily with oxygen. Water activity measurements quantify this stability scientifically. Food scientists use a scale from 0 to 1, where fresh meat measures approximately 0.99 and pure salt measures close to 0. Bacteria require water activity above 0.9 to grow. Mold needs levels above 0.7. Properly made pemmican measures below 0.3, comparable to dry crackers or hard candy. The result is a food existing in a state of suspended animation. Not frozen, not chemically preserved, but simply to dry and to seal for any biological process to occur. Time passes, but degradation does not. The same principles that kept pemmican edible in 1911 Antarctica work identically in a modern basement pantry. Number 4. Nutritional completeness in one food. Most preserved foods sacrifice nutrition for longevity. Canning destroys heat-sensitive vitamins. Freezing damages cellular structures. Chemical preservatives add substances while removing nothing of value but often displacing actual nutrients. Pemmican takes a different approach, concentrating nutrition rather than degrading it. The base ingredient is pure lean meat, typically beef or bison. Drying removes only water, leaving protein, minerals, and fat-soluble vitamins intact. Pound for pound, dried meat contains far higher nutrient concentrations than fresh meat because the water weight is gone. Every bite delivers more protein, more iron, more zinc, and more B vitamins than the equivalent weight of steak. Rendered tallow contributes its own nutritional value beyond mere calories. Animal fats from grass-fed animals contain meaningful amounts of vitamins D, E, and K. These fat-soluble vitamins require dietary fat for absorption. Pemmican provides both the vitamins and the fat needed to utilize them in a single food. When traditional makers added dried berries, typically Saskatoon or chokecherry, they incorporated vitamin C and various antioxidants. This addition wasn't random. Indigenous peoples understood through generations of observation that berry pemmican provided something the plain version lacked during long winters without fresh plant foods. Arctic explorer Vilhjalmur Stefansson tested pemmican's nutritional completeness directly. During his expeditions between 1906 and 1918, Stefansson spent months at a time eating nothing but pemmican and fresh meat when available. He experienced no deficiency symptoms. Later, under medical supervision in New York, he spent an entire year eating only meat and fat to demonstrate the diet's safety. Doctors monitoring his health found no deficiencies or deterioration. Number 5. The abandonment. Refrigerators entered American homes gradually during the 1930s and became nearly universal by the late 1950s. By 1955, over 80% of households owned a refrigerator. This single appliance transformed how families thought about food preservation. Technologies that had sustained humanity for centuries became unnecessary seemingly overnight. Fresh and frozen meat appeared in every grocery store. Why would anyone eat dried meat mixed with fat when wrap steaks sat in refrigerated cases? The infrastructure that made pemmican essential, a world without reliable cold chains, simply vanished in developed nations within a single generation. Military procurement shifted alongside civilian preferences. The United States standardized on canned rations during World War II and continued developing canned and later freeze-dried options afterward. Canning infrastructure already existed at scale. Production was fast, cheap, and familiar. Pemmican required specialized knowledge and labor-intensive processes that industrial food systems couldn't easily replicate. Then came the fat panic. Starting in the 1960s, nutrition authorities began blaming saturated fat for heart disease. The 1977 dietary goals for the United States officially recommended reducing saturated fat intake. Suddenly, a food consisting of 50% animal fat represented everything health experts warned against. Commercial pemmican faced immediate market collapse. What company would invest in producing a product that official government guidelines said consumers should avoid? The same saturated fat that made pemmican shelf-stable made it culturally unacceptable and obsessed with low-fat eating. Regulatory burdens added further obstacles. USDA inspection requirements designed for industrial slaughterhouses made small-scale production expensive and complicated. Traditional methods didn't fit neatly into bureaucratic frameworks. Artisan producers faced costs that destroyed already thin margins. Finally, taste expectations had shifted. Modern palates, trained on industrial food products, found tallow unfamiliar. Number 6. What modern alternatives cannot match? Grocery stores offer numerous preserved meat options today. Canned beef, beef jerky, freeze-dried meals, and various processed meat products fill shelves. None approach pemmican's preservation capabilities, and most fall dramatically short. Commercially canned meat typically carries expiration dates of 2 to 5 years. Industry recommendations suggest consuming canned products within this window for optimal quality. Some canned goods remain safe longer, but nutritional degradation and quality loss occur progressively. The canning process itself destroys heat-sensitive vitamins during initial processing. Modern jerky presents different limitations. Commercial jerky contains enough residual moisture to require preservatives for safety. Those preservatives, typically sodium nitrite and various chemicals, enable shelf lives measured in months rather than decades. Home-dried jerky without preservatives spoils even faster. Neither version approaches pemmican's longevity. Freeze-dried meat achieves impressive moisture removal, but lacks the fat encapsulation that protects pemmican. Exposed to oxygen over time, freeze-dried products degrade. Manufacturers compensate with oxygen absorbers and specialized packaging. Even with these interventions, recommended storage periods typically span 7 to 25 years under ideal conditions. Pemmican achieves comparable or superior longevity using technology available in the Stone Age. MRS, meals ready to eat, represent the military's current solution. These pouch meals contain moisture levels far exceeding pemmican. Official shelf life at room temperature, approximately 3 years. Storage in heat reduces this dramatically. Number 7. Making pemmican today. Nothing prevents anyone from making pemmican at home. The process requires no specialized equipment beyond a food dehydrator or oven, no rare ingredients beyond quality meat and fat, and no advanced skills beyond patience and attention to detail. Start with lean meat. Beef round, bison, venison, or elk all work well. Trim every visible piece of fat from the meat. Fat attached to meat turns rancid quickly. Only separately rendered tallow achieves long-term stability. Slice the trimmed meat thin, no more than a 1/4 inch thick, cutting against the grain for easier drying. Dry the meat completely. This step cannot be rushed. Use a food dehydrator set between 145 and 160 degrees or an oven at the lowest possible setting with the door cracked. Drying takes anywhere from 8 to 24 hours depending on thickness and humidity. The meat should snap cleanly when bent, shattering rather than bending. Grind the dried meat to powder. A food processor works, though traditional methods used stone and muscle. The finer the powder, the better the fat incorporates. Aim for consistency resembling coarse flour rather than chunks. Render the tallow separately. Beef kidney fat, called suet, produces the cleanest tallow. Cut suet into small pieces and heat slowly over low flame or in a slow cooker. As fat melts, strain through cheesecloth repeatedly until liquid runs perfectly clear. Any protein fragments remaining will cause premature spoilage. Proper rendering takes hours and demands attention. Combine equal weights of meat powder and warm liquid tallow. Mix thoroughly until the fat coats every particle. The mixture should hold together when pressed, but remain crumbly rather than greasy. Add dried berries if desired, roughly 10% by weight, mixing them in at the end. Pack the mixture tightly into storage containers, eliminating air pockets. Traditional methods used rawhide bags. Modern makers use mason jars, vacuum bags, or food-grade buckets. Store in a cool, dark location. Properly made pemmican requires no refrigeration and will outlast its maker. Indigenous peoples of North America developed the most effective meat preservation method in human history. European explorers adopted this technology and used it to reach both poles. Allied forces relied on it during the deadliest war ever fought. Documented samples remained edible after 50 years of storage. Then within a single generation, we stopped making it. Refrigeration made traditional preservation seem unnecessary. Dietary guidelines made animal fat seem dangerous. Industrial food systems made labor-intensive methods seem obsolete. Regulatory frameworks made small-scale production seem impractical. None of these factors reflected problems with pemmican itself. The product worked exactly as it always had. The world around it changed in ways that left no commercial space for genuine preservation capability. Today, cold chains span continents. Electricity flows constantly into billions of refrigerators. The infrastructure that replaced pemmican functions remarkably well until the moment it fails. Extended power outages, supply chain disruptions, or economic instability expose vulnerabilities that traditional preservation never created. Pemmican requires no electricity, no chemical preservatives, no replacement parts, no ongoing fuel supply. Just ancient knowledge and basic ingredients. We didn't stop making it because we found something better. We stopped making it because we forgot why it mattered.